Hello again, this is UML Operator. In our last session, we talked about the Start tab. In this session, we're going to focus on the Design tab. In the Design tab, we'll move through the ribbon and the groups. You can see in the ribbon, like any of the ribbons throughout the tabs, they're separated by borders into groups and relevant tools. The Design tab lets you manage packages, diagrams, elements, and provides a dictionary. You can see in the package group, there are subcategories separated by these borders. In the first area, we have Add Package. Basically brings up the new package dialog box. I don't tend to use this. I tend to go to the browser, wherever the browser is, and I want to add a package this way. Brings up the same dialog box, but it's available to you here as well. Next, we have Model Wizard. I'm going to go ahead and select it. It takes me to create from pattern in the start page. So this is what the start page looks like when you bring it up. If you select this, it takes you right to this tab. Next is Manage in this group. And remember, we're focused on package. So this is Manage Package, all right? So I'm going to select this and I get this drop down. Package, Tools, Baselines, Options, Copy, and Find. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these in this session. I'm going to cover these in separate sessions. Very important. But here, if I'm on a package and I'm on the e-commerce package, I can select Properties and it brings up the Properties dialog box. The other way to do that is to right-click over in the browser and bring up Properties. That's like 3 clicks to bring up this dialog box. So I typically go to Design, Manage, Properties. So again, I'll talk about these other very important categories and tooling in a later session. All right, within the package group, the next subcategory is around matrices. And this will be a later session as well. These are extremely powerful. I know I use powerful a lot with Sparx, but there's so much power in this when it comes to modeling. It's going to take a lot of sessions to cover and expose that. So gap analysis, I do a lot of gap analysis, especially in TOGAF, the Open Group Architecture Framework, but extremely useful tooling within the package group. The next subgroup at a package is Transform. And this is going to be a later video as well. But I welcome you to select Help here, go to Sparx Systems, read what they have here around transformation, transform templates. We'll cover this in another session as well. All right, then we get into specification view, mouse over, it tells you, also gives you the shortcut, list view, and Gantt view, right? So I'm going to go to a diagram and I'm going to select specification view for this package. And you can see it brings up the elements that are in this package in the specification manager. The other way to get to this is to right click on the package and go left click on specification manager. You can also hit Control-0 when you're on the package that you want to bring up the specification manager for. The next one, I wanted to show something else. So I'm going to select this again. As soon as we did this, it brought up another tab and ribbon specific to specification. So I didn't want to skip over that. Let's go back to the Design tab because it put me focus on Specify. I want to go back to the Design tab. So I'm going to close Specification Manager. I'm in the e-commerce package. We're in the package group here. I'm going to go to List View. And so what this is doing is taking all of the elements that are in this package, including sub-packages. There's a sub-package here called Signals, and it puts it into a list view. This is useful when you want to understand the status of particular elements or packages or sub-packages, dates they were modified, the element types, and so on. Very powerful and useful. The next one, project management, mostly is the Gantt view. So I'm in the signals package I had selected, it went into the Gantt view for signals. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to close this one. Go back to the e-commerce package and select Gantt view again. And now if I open this, I can go into a Gantt view for all of the elements and packages. And this will be a later session as well, because here's where you manage resources that are working on delivering your effort over a period of time. Before we move to the diagram group, I skipped over something that's important and useful. So in the package group under the manage icon, you can see something called level numbering. I get asked this quite a bit. So I'm on the e-commerce package. I have elements that are in this package. I can go into manage, turn on level numbering, and now you'll see that the elements are numbered. Now, when this becomes useful, it's when you have composite diagrams and elements within those diagrams, and you have sublayers, and then you're doing reporting. It can give you an idea or reference point through the numbering. And I'll talk about this more as we're progressing into building real models, but I wanted to make sure I covered that. All right, now let's get into the diagram group where you have the toolbox. So you can turn on the toolbox. I showed you in previous videos. So that I turn the toolbox off, I can turn the toolbox on. So in some views, you might not have the toolbox on. You quickly want to bring up the toolbox relevant to that diagram, and you can simply turn it on right here. All right, next is add diagram. Just what it states, similar to add package. I tend to use in browser this icon right here to add a diagram, brings up this dialog box. I can choose from various types and diagram types that I want right from this icon within browser. But if you don't have access to that and you're in the design tab, you can add a diagram this way. Just make sure you're on the packages you want to be. You can see your package. You can always change what package you're going to, and then give it a diagram name. If it will take the default for the package you're on. You can give it a unique name, and then choose the type from UML structural, behavioral, extended, or the many other MDGs that Sparx provides that we spoke about earlier. I want to make sure I'm saying this correctly so folks understand. You saw that I use the term MDGs. In the old days, a lot of this tooling you acquired separately. So Sparx might have been less expensive, but you had to buy this tooling here for modeling. Over the years and major releases, they've incorporated this tooling for model-driven generation efforts into the Sparx overall package. So I wanted to bring that up and spend some time on that. I'm going to keep saying MDG. I probably should be saying perspectives or types or things like that, but you'll hear me say MDG, model-driven generation is what the acronym stands for. I just wanted to cover that here. Probably be the last time I say that or cover it, so let's move on. All right, next is manage. Manage covers a lot of different things, but what I want to make sure we understand is we're on diagram. So I've selected this diagram and I'm going to manage. If you're not on a diagram and you hit this, some things may not be enabled, like lock. You can see it's disabled. Clone as new version is disabled. When I select and focus on a diagram, lock is now available. Clone's not available at this particular time. We'll talk about that later, but I want to make sure you understand enable and disable options within your tooling and your menu choices as we're moving forward. So we're in a diagram. You can lock the diagram. As soon as I lock the diagram, get a little padlock up here, right? There's another way to do that by right-clicking in the diagram. You can see lock diagram is selected. I can unselect, left click, and you can see the little lock is gone. So I'll go back to manage. Let's see here, add as working set. I'm going to talk about this in a later session. you're going to be using working sets a lot, especially when you have large projects, a lot of models, and you want to keep your momentum going and you want to stay focused. So it focuses, but you can add these to working sets, but I want to cover this in a later video because it's very important. So we get into roadmaps. We're going to talk about that later. We use this quite a bit in enterprise architecture. Search capabilities, you can see the categories that give you diagram tools. Overlays, talk about overlays later. And find, these are search capabilities. So, browse for diagram. I'm able to look for where the diagram is, where elements are. You're going to see that in this manage, and then we get the elements, this manage right here. But let's get into view. So I'm in diagrams, we're going to select view. So just like in package, I'm able to go to a list view. I'm able to go to, let me get back to the diagram and hit this little back arrow right here. Back in the diagram here, Gantt views, we spoke about this. So now I'm in the diagram only, really meant focus the diagram. These are the elements that are in this diagram. So I'm able to do Gantt, resource management, roles and task assignments, and so on. But that'll be another later session as well. Right, specification view. I bring this up, it goes to the specification view for this particular diagram. Same as the specification manager. I'm going to hit the back arrow. We're going to go back to design because it brought up the specification tab and specification tooling, but I'll get back to that in a second. So we're in views, relationship matrices, construct views. I'll cover that later. This is the one I wanted to get to. Inline specification. I use this a lot when I'm modeling and I'm in the diagram. I'll go ahead and select it. Inline. So it brings the specification capabilities in line with the diagram. And when I select each one of these, look at that. It focuses on the element within the diagram. So if you're working on extremely large, let me make this larger. I go to internet, boom, I'm right to it. Load balancer, machine learning, AI. See, I'm able to get to these things very fast to do my documentation. So the other way to do documentation, of course, is to select the element you want in notes and then type your intelligence here. But in the beginning, when you're brainstorming and you're building, you have blank elements, they don't have intelligence yet underneath them. Inline specification, extremely productive. So use this a lot. Again, you can see specification tab popped up. I have tooling here for inline specification. We'll cover this in another video. There's lots of things I can do around display, around elements, and more. All right, let's go back around the specify tab. We're going to go back to the design tab. We're in the design, a diagram rather, group, and we're in views, right? Inline specification, I'm going to turn it off. Now it's off. So turn it on, turn it off that way. Views, inline specification. Just know when you click on it, it takes you to the specify tab, right? So just remember that. Hey, what happened? Where did things go? Go back to design, go to views, turn that off. All right, next we're going to go to options, and options you have, you're going to use this a lot. I'll talk through this a bit. Let me zoom out. I'm going to go to pen and zoom. I'm going to make this fit. I'm going to roll over because I want to set us up for the next conversation. All right, so go back to browser. Oh, and I want to turn off, I don't like to leave level numbering on, so I'm going to turn that off. All right, now we're going to go back to options. Okay, this is an important one. A lot of people ask about it. I don't spend a lot of time teaching this, but configure Z order. As soon as I select this, over here under properties, I have this tab that popped up called Object Z Order. And you can see it sees out of the database all the elements that are in this diagram, right? So I'm going to select internet. As soon as I did that, you see these numbers pop up next to them. Load balancer. Let's go to e-commerce site. You can see the colors change. Blue, I'm focused on it. Chat. This becomes very useful when you're trying to find elements, especially in a large diagram during a presentation or having a conversation. So having object Z order up is very powerful. You can change the order, like for instance, if I wanted CRM to be above chat, these arrows here I can progress or move them down. So up or down within the Z order in which I want to talk about. So I might have a conversation where I want to talk about things in a particular order. I can go through and I can have that conversation this way and go through all the other elements this way. There's a lot more to talk about with object Z order, what it's used for and so on, but I'll cover it in a later session. We'll get into compartments and those kind of things in a later session, but Z order was important to spend some time on. All right, the next one is make all elements selectable. It's just what it sounds like. And we'll talk about this later. You can change elements during your work to not be selectable for various reasons. This is a way to come up here in options, just make everything back to selectable. All right, let's get to the big one. Change type. Sometimes you create diagrams, like this is a class diagram, and I want to change the type of that. I can go and hit, I'm on the diagram, focus. I can go and change type. I can change this to any type of diagram. Now, I want you to be careful about this. We'll talk about this more as we're progressing in modeling, because the rules change. I mean, Sparx does a very good job of sticking with the OMG UML standards, whatever the current version is. And the rules are going to change if you move to another diagram type. Now, I think they have fixed some of the issues. This is a long time ago. I would change diagram type, it would change the rules, and I would break things. But now Sparx is really good about making sure that that doesn't happen. But we'll see that as we're going through, right? This one you're going to use a lot. I'm always creating diagrams when I'm starting during brainstorming of one type, like analysis diagram, and then I want to change to a class diagram. Like this is not a real class diagram per se. It's more of a domain architecture for conversation. It's not following the naming conventions for class elements. It breaks a lot of rules, but this diagram is for a specific reason. And later on, I go through and I create different views. I slice and dice these diagrams, and I want to change the type. So I go to Design tab, I go to Options, I go to Change Type, and I change it to whatever type I want or need at that specific time. When we get into cloning diagrams, copying diagrams, you're going to see that's going to be more useful and powerful. Right? Actions, I'm going to skip over this one. I talked about auto reload, change diagrams, setting up preferences and doing other things. I don't usually focus on this, but when you're working in a team environment where you've got lots of teams working on the same namespace, package, project, and you want to see what changes are rippling across, you want to work with this. So this is auto reload, change diagrams. So if I'm in a diagram or diagrams, I select this, and what it's doing is it's auto reloading based on the team environment and any other changes that were allowed to take place. Now, if I'm working on a diagram, I don't want other team members making any changes in my diagram. So it should show locked for them, read only. Now, I too may have read only diagrams up, and I might want to make some changes, but I want them to be done. I might turn this on or have that feature available. All right, let's roll over to the element group. And in the element group, the very first tooling that's available is add element, right? So you have the ability to add element, multiple elements, and insert. So new and insert are the categories that are there. So what I want to do is select new element. So I get the dialog box for a new element that pops up, and I can name the element, etc., and it adds it to the package, right? I'm going to cancel. I tend to add new elements using the toolbar. If I want to create a new element, I just drag and drop it in, right? I'm going to go ahead and Alt-G and right-click and delete what I just added. There we go. So that's gone. So I tend to do that and not use this feature, but it may be valuable to you. All right, next is manage, another one of my favorites. Just like manage in diagrams and manage in packages, This is extremely powerful. I got to stop saying powerful. It gives you the ability to lock elements from changes, lock element with children, everything under it, and documentation, editing, advanced features, and so on. All right. But this I use a lot for managing my elements, especially advanced change. Look at this. I'm able to change an element to another element type. Now, be careful when you're using this. Sometimes it's dangerous. So just play around with it. Be careful in using it. But, if I create an object element, I want to turn it to a class element. I go to advanced change type, and it may be an object element that's here as my selection, and that's cool. You're not allowed to do. Oh, here it is, object. So if I hit OK, I'm moving this to an object element. Right? I don't want to do that. I'm going to hit cancel. Play around with that one. I'll demo and show that later on as we're going through some modeling and brainstorming exercises. Now, the next one is properties. I find this a little bit confusing. I'm on an element, I select properties. I want to get to the properties, but instead I get the properties pop up. I guess Sparx either wanted you to see a lot of things that you can do around the properties of an element, but that's not what I'm looking for. Right now, to get to property dialog box within the element, I right click on it, I go to left click on properties, mouse over and select, and it brings up the property dialog box. You can see that took multiple clicks, right and left to get to. I'd love to have a feature where I can just click it, one click, and get to properties. But, I bring that up, and it puts me over on this property box in the lower right, right? Now that's, as I stated earlier, the properties is whatever is relevant to the action that you're doing. So I just thought when I got to its element properties, well, this is element properties right here. So they're not wrong. That's what element properties are, but I can get to that by clicking on any of those, and I got properties up by default. I'm going to get to it. I want to get to the properties dialog box. And unless any of you know the shortcut for doing that, I'll figure it out or make it myself. We can talk about that later. All right. Comment down below. Let me know what you think, what your thoughts are and experience, and let's work together and learn together. All right. The next is feature matrix. This is extremely powerful. I'm going to say it again. But I have to cover this in another video. You're going to use this a lot, especially when you get into requirements, capabilities, features, then transitioning from non-technical to technical development. This is extremely useful. How's that instead of powerful? Extremely useful, all right? The next one is extremely useful, and that's trace. So I naturally have traceability turned on in the lower right. I have it embedded within the lower right window. So I'm going to go back to notes. And if I don't have traceability up, the way that you get to it is clicking this, and it brings up traceability. Look at that. So let me close this and try to do something here to show you. So I'm going to click on traceability. It pops up right here for me. Now, if I have, and I don't, it's going to know to pop up what my workspace is. But let me just drag it out here and click it. It could pop up anywhere for you. But when I select it, look at that, I remembered it. It's going to pop up wherever you have it. It's going to go. I'm going to drag and drop this back over to where I like it. And I like traceability right after properties and before features. So I'm just holding down the left mouse button and I'm dragging and dropping this, but I talk about that in an earlier session. All right, next is behavior, scenarios, and decisions. And I am going to cover this in a later session, especially when we start getting into code engineering and other engineering. We're going to go into that. Scenarios, very useful. This brings up scenarios depending on the element that you're on, takes you right to scenarios. There's other ways to get to scenarios. We'll talk about scenarios later, and you can always go to help. Decisioning, I said earlier, I'm going to have a video on DMN, decision modeling notation. I'll have that later, but this is, I want to say powerful again, extremely powerful. Click on help. It's going to take you over to Sparx help and you can get into that. I want to get to the dictionary and then we're going to wrap up. All right, dictionary. As I stated in one of our very beginning videos, I'm a creative speller. So I need spell check. And this is extremely useful, right? Another thing is glossary. I'm going to select glossary right now. It's blank, but you can add new definitions. If you're a crazy company like the enterprise that I came from, anywhere pretty much in any enterprise, but especially in telecommunications, we're acronym crazy. And remembering acronyms, especially if they're used in business or they're used technical or other types, gets very, very crazy. So what I'm going to do is have a video on glossary, on the usefulness of using glossary. Every time you create a term within Sparx, it shows up defined in your documentation. So if I had an element, and I'm just going to come in here and type in Archimate, right? And people are looking at it, it's misspelled. What is Archimate? So I can right click on it, and I can add it to the dictionary. I don't want to do that right now. But what is Archimate? Or what is some other acronym? If I'm over in the glossary and I'm adding new, I'm going to type in Archimate. Hopefully I spell it right. I'm going to come in here, hit the triple dots. I don't have technologies. Maybe I'm not ready to. I'm just going to say technology, matter of fact, frameworks. All right. So I have Archimate under frameworks. I told Archimate is a TOGAF framework or modeling language. I'm sure all of the trolls out there in comments are going to be hammering me, but that's what it is, right? So now I have Archimate defined in here. And you can get as verbose as you want. And we're going to go out. Where did I type that in? Let's type it in here. Archimate. Archimate. Look at that. As soon as I did that, it's underlined. It means they can mouse over and you can see it pop up. It gives the definition. So when you're looking at documentation, I spent too much time on this. When you're looking at documentation, you have acronyms, your users in your modeling environment can mouse over it. You can print out your glossary and include it in your web views and your documentation, but we'll cover glossary more. Extremely useful tooling, especially in domain-driven design, DDD. When you're trying to achieve a ubiquitous language, your glossary within your Sparx EA modeling projects is going to be, I'm going to say it again, extremely powerful. Right, in this session, we covered the design tab, we covered package group, diagram group, element group, and dictionary. I hope this video was helpful for you. I'll leave chapters down below so you can bookmark, go to those when you need to reflect on them. It's very important you understand these ribbons, especially the start ribbon, design ribbon, layout ribbon, which we're going to cover in the next session, and publish ribbon. Later on, when we get more advanced, we'll get into settings and then simulation and development. So I look forward to talking to you in the next session. Please leave comments below, good or bad. We're working together. We're sharing together. I'm giving you unified modeling language, computer-aided system and software engineering case from my perspective and my 20+ years of experience. Looking forward. Talk to you later. Thanks again. Bye-bye.